winning 90% of your new business because you have some sort of incredible value.
I'm going to take a bit of a different angle.
I've got a budget this big. I'm going to give it to you because you have a really killer plan.
You give a Red Bull to a turtle, what do you expect?
I think that's a dead turtle. So let's move on to...
E-Rig.
Cheers.
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 Does your current premium finance company lock you into long-term agreements? That's because they don't want you talking to us. At IFS, we win your business the good old-fashioned way, with customer service. I know you don't always have to use a premium finance company, but when you do, you should use IFS. Cheers.
Hey there, and welcome to the Digital Insurance Point podcast. As always, I'm your host, Tom Reed. I am joined by my colleagues, Steve Earle, CEO of Bald Insurance. Steve.
Hello.
And Adam Mitchell, CEO of Mitch Insurance.
Hello.
And Jeff Roy, CEO of Excalibur Insurance and other duties under the empire that is McFarland.
Hey,
what are your other duties, by the way, Jeff?
Just whatever needs to get done. You know, what's a guy, the Pulp Fiction, the cleanup guy, just whatever needs to be done. Just tap me in the shoulder, help out. Right?
The cleaner guy. Oh, no. All right.
No.
Well,
no, just joking. No, doing some marketing, doing some digital, some stuff that I like to do, right? So
I was about to introduce this as a Fuck It Friday episode, but I think we've already done that just by our casual intro here. So we're going to talk about a couple of things. One of the topics, well, certainly as of recent, depends on when this episode gets broadcast. We'll see how recent it is at that point. But Navacord just purchased Acera. And so let's have a quick chat about that. Who wants to opine from the cheap seats first on this deal?
Well, here's the case in point for everyone to realize this is unrehearsed. Okay, let's ramble on. First off the cuff, I think it's an unbelievable win for the Navacord team. The story they've pulled off the hip, 10 years of this journey, outpacing NFP. They were backed by Madison Dearborn, and then to get Capri and Rogers, now Acera, and that's a monster brokerage that was nothing maybe 15 years ago. I don't know when the actual inception started, but not that long versus the meteoric rise of what they've done. And Sean and team have navigated that really well. So I'll open it up with the positive of that's impressive. I'll tip my hat as a competitor, and I say in air quotes competitor. I think they're a little dot on the horizon. I'm hoping to still keep in the viewfinder.
I don't know. Same with Adam. I mean, it's a colossal deal. How is it going to affect us little people? The big are getting bigger. Everybody's been saying this for years. There's going to be 5 or 6 that control 90% of the marketplace. Are we even getting close to that now?
I would say so, because when we did that M&A series a couple of years ago, right? We did the math, and I think we interviewed 7. We had 7 of the big guys, of which Navacord was one, and at the time Rogers / CBN was another. And I'll get to that in a few minutes. But I think we did the math that they were pushing $30 billion at the time. Those guys, just based on from comments they made, and at the time that was out of $85 billion in total premium in the country. So, but of that, the broker market probably owns about 55, 60. So 3 years ago, that group of 7, which did not include NFP, was about 50% of the broker market, right? So it's just grown since then. They're not 90, no way.
So we're 70 probably anyway.
In that ballpark, I would say 60 at the low end, probably 70 at the high end. Yeah, it's significantly consolidated.
Yeah. So my questions would be on a go-forward basis: how much further can it go? Will it go? What's private equity's effect when they own that much of the market share? Relevancy with markets for smaller brokers like Adam. they're all sort of balls in the air right now.
Yeah. Well, let's talk to Jeff, who's on the inside of one of the mega brokerages out there. Jeff, what's the perspective? And maybe you can think about it from two perspectives. Just from your own perspective, you saw that article, you had a reaction, and what's the perspective from the colleagues that you work with who are essentially not a dot on the horizon compared to Navacord?
Yeah, I think a good starting point is congratulations to Sean. I do know Fayam Beatty. She's a CFO. My best friend's wife is Fayam Beatty. I did not know about the deal, obviously, like everybody else, till it was announced. At first, I'm like, wow, that's incredible for Navacord. Big win. What is it? 7.2 billion in a combined insurance, like in employee benefits. And I think they manage 7 or 7.5 billion in retirement assets. So they're a behemoth. They've done very well. And as Sean pointed out, he predicted he would be 5 billion. By this point, he's at 7.2 billion. So he's completely crushed his goals. I have to go back to our podcast, but I think 5 billion was a number, and now he's hit 7.2. So they got to be pretty thrilled. It'll be interesting to see how Marshall Saad, Sean, Lee Rogers, and Andrew Kemp all work together. Be interesting. Are they going to stay on and continue to work 5 or 10 more years? Is somebody making an exit? It'll be interesting to see what the management looks like moving forward there. I think it was a big win, obviously, for the employees. I'm sure they did very well with the employee ownership. A couple things I'm wondering about. It'll be interesting to see with CBN. I think they don't have independent ownership over a certain percentage. Steve, this is I think you're the only CBN member left on the podcast. Be interesting to see how CBN makes changes or accommodates this or doesn't accommodate this. That'll be interesting to see as people become big. So I think, great opportunity for them. A lot of wins over there, but just getting big and putting stuff together, there's a little more trickiness involved in that. So wish them the best of luck as they come together. From a MIG standpoint, we see everybody getting bigger. Actually, by them coming together, it moves up probably a point in the top 10 because there's one less person in there and they're combined. So if you want to get technical, it's, I think Steve and I and Adam sat in Vegas in 2017, and a guy named Bruce Rabick, who used to be with Acera, came up to us and he said, "Hey, I'm the X number of dollars. We're way too small." And we just all looked at ourselves because we are a fraction of that number, and we were in disbelief, only to find out that he was right back in 2017 and where the market was going. So
was he right though, Jeff?
Yeah.
Well, you guys are proving that you guys have all your markets. You're running things yourself. You're proving. There's lots of other models, which I'm sure we'll talk about today, that you don't have to do anything. But a lot of people are going that way. But those people will find a way to survive.
I know some insurance companies have pivoted strategy, so I won't call out the name of the company, but an executive saying that they're starting to put some chips back on the small broker and startup or other, because the grass hasn't been green all the time with these monster partners. And, private equity's got a lot of reputations, and one of it isn't necessarily for friendliness and partnership. It's about moving everything to optimize the nickel. And the insurance companies that thought these were going to be great, massive partners are finding their books can flip pretty quickly per program, per risk, per thing.
Quite possible. So let me jump in here. So, we did interview for part of our M&A series from a couple of years ago, actually technically, but just about 3 years ago exactly. We did have Sean DeSantis, and we also had Bruce Rabick, who at the time was with Rogers /CBN. So I took the liberty of feeding both of those podcasts through Google Notebook LM, asked it a few pointed questions, summarize these, compare them, give me the pros and cons. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of points because I could read the whole thing, but that would take forever.
This is great. We got a little AI coming into here, I'd be interested to see what the large language models think of our podcast and what happened, and can't wait to hear this. This is pretty new stuff. Love it.
So the first thing it said is, "Hey, there's no record of Navacord purchasing CBN in your podcast," and I'm like, "I know, because that was after whatever." So I did talk about. So they said they both brand themselves as Canadian alternatives to American giants. Navacord talked about their building culture. They are the great Canadian brokerage, fairly decentralized model. Navacord acts as a holding company. They do buy out 100% of the brokerage, but the selling partners roll a chunk of their equity back into Navacord shares. They are looking for a very specific investment returns over a moderate period, 4 to 6 year period, and they do a lot of work on getting new producers and so on. Contrast that with Rogers Insurance, or now Acera. It was Rogers at the time. They positioned themselves as a forever firm, very broad employee ownership. At the time, they had 160 or so employee shareholders. Bruce Rabick was very critical of Canadian firms that were controlled by American private equity. Interestingly enough, and a lot of collaboration and sharing amongst the various CBN members. So again, Notebook LM came up with a few pros, which was, speaking of carriers, massive scale for carrier negotiations, right? So they had, at the time, and it's more now, they had, a couple $100 million per market, getting them top of the pile. They had succession solutions for people who wanted to buy into it, centralized talent development. And then there's the cons. So a lot of this is coming from Bruce, right? Talk about the eroding that employee ownership, which Rogers / now Acera was super proud of and did a very good job of marketing that. Different time horizons, losing true independence, and potentially a fair amount of cultural friction. So that's the AI review. What do you guys think of that?
Question: is Madison Dearborn still the major financer of Navacord? I've lost touch, but is that still the U.S. money?
So I don't know that I've seen it switch. They were behind NFP and Navacord.
I'm going to throw that as a great Canadian debate. Are you a great Canadian company if you're financed by and owned by an equity company in the U.S.? I'm going to throw that out in the universe. I don't know. I don't have an answer for it, but that's going to be an interesting question to banter around when a lot of people have put that in their sleeve about being independently owned, being Canadian, and then all of a sudden that script's flipped instantaneously. Or is it? I don't know. Steve, Tom, what do you think about that? Does it matter? Like if you got Canadian people running it and you've got a Canadian employees, is that enough DNA to still make you Canadian?
Well, let me. I still want to come back to my question from before, but let me answer your question with a question. Is Tim Hortons still Canadian? Right? It's owned by a Brazilian private equity firm now, right?
Yeah.
My take on it is if you operate in Canada, and focus on Canada, have Canadian employees, whatever, that's a pretty strong argument of being Canadian, right? So to me, that's, I get it. Some folks like to snipe at each other, say you're not Canadian because your owner is American. Well, there's lots of Canadian firms whose owners are American or Brazilian, as the case may be.
What does it matter? Like, is that not just a reverse Trump argument of like you're winning or you're losing? Like, why do you have to draw a boundary against something superior or not? And I guess you can say the supporting Canadian argument of the dollar staying here, but
it's to me it's marketing, right? The reason that CBN was out there saying they're Canadian is because they wanted to have producers who, if they had a choice between Navacord or NFP and them, that this would be an argument in their favor. This is Canadian. You're Canadian. You should play with us.
It was a good angle. They had an angle and they hammered it, and it did well.
It's a great angle. Absolutely.
It is what it is. We could talk about this bullshit all day. But I'd like to go back to something that Adam said with those chips being distributed maybe to the smaller players because their insurers are rethinking their relationships, particularly with entities that are actually larger than them. And I think that we should maybe talk about what some of the pros are. Some of the stuff that I've seen.
From whose perspective? From
our perspective and being, who we are, me and you anyway. Some of what I've seen from larger brokers, we can pivot quicker internally. I find anyway. Look, some of the stuff that you've deployed, Adam, would be really, really hard to do and take quite a bit longer and have much more complexity at a $30 billion brokerage.
It's a double-edged sword because we watch it on the other side. Big, well-organized brokerages can operationalize things and changes throughout the org. And then we watch small brokerages where there's a dozen people all running their own little business and thinking and program in it. So I think you're right, but equally, it's two sides to a coin. That small doesn't necessarily mean effective.
No, agreed.
It can mean you can be quite nimble if you grab the wheel firmly and drive it. But then equally, you make a wrong step and mistake, you could set yourself back 2 years.
You get your speedboat versus your ocean liner, right? The way to pivot, and there's advantages of being nimble and moving and adapting the market. Like with AI, Steve, if you want to implement something and you see something, you can approve it. You don't have to get people to buy in. You don't have to put in your budget. You can just go ahead and do it. And your EBITDA, your equity might not be as good, but you're investing in the future. You can make that call. You don't have to run it by people. There's not a budget, so you have that flexibility. However, if you make a wrong move, you don't have as much money in the pocketbook to make missteps, right? So you better to be a fast follower, probably, but there's things you can innovate. Hey, if things go bad and I'm out 10 or 15K, but I've learned from it and it helps me with the next thing, that's a good investment. So, I think, there's pros and cons of both sides of it, right?
And I think it's a good generalization, but it's fair to call it a generalization because not all small is nimble and effective, and not all big is slow and ineffective, right? Like you take some of the monster brokerage publicly traded and you look at Gallagher versus Aon and say, well, Gallagher's a lot scrappier and more entrepreneurial than, the giant Aon, and pound for pound, they're not a whole lot different in size or value. And vice versa. You can go down, it's not faceless, but I won't go to the other small brokerages, and some are going to be effective while small and some are not.
At the end of the day, it's culture. It's your culture, it's your DNA, and it depends what you sell, what you do, but can the culture that made them successful live, and can they get synergies? Does 1 + 1 = 3? Do they get along? Can they write songs like McCarthy and Lennon together? Can they make better music than could individually? Generally there's scale and a lot of other benefits, but at the end of the day, it's got to come down to culture and how they fit together with their people, because people are the ones that execute things. AI and technology, they help you do things, but they're not the executors, right?
So begs the question of who is the Yoko Ono of Acera? Who's going to come in and mess up this Lennon and McCartney partnership here?
Private equity.
There you go.
Well, I guess what is their turn? Like now that they're 7.5 billion, private equity has to turn every 2-5 years. Is the next step for them to become publicly traded? Like what happens next? Is somebody bigger? There's not a lot of people bigger that can come in with a lot of cash to buy them, but what is the next flip of Navacord, right? I guess that's what you have to ask, right?
We talked about this, if I recall correctly, during our M&A podcast. It was like when you have one of these giant brokerages, and Navacord is now probably one of, if not the giantest, certainly like top 2, right? We talked about who buys those guys, and is it like Google or is it an IPO, right? That's because I don't see any other path to actually be able to cash in on that equity.
Here's your non-answer answer. It's either public or private. It encompasses everyone.
Or you missed government. I mean, in theory, the government could buy them. Package it in with Trans Mountain Pipeline or something.
Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, like two lines. They're unrelated, but I was holding on to the Munger thought for a second, and then I got the Buffett one. So I think this is Munger. I might be misattributing it. The idea of you show me the incentive plan, and I'll show you the outcome, right? So when you had something like Acera, where it was massively distributed to a lot of partners inside that thing, and they had a really nice buy-in price, guaranteed. Navacord, or the owners of it, paid much bigger than that. So it was sort of inevitable. There was a financial return that all that needed to happen was an offer across to make it happen, because the comp aligned with the outcome. The second one is the Buffett on Bitcoin. This is kind of ramming a wrong quote in there, but the idea that Bitcoin's just based on the greater fool theory is all of these things have to transact over to somebody else who sees some future value one day. Now, the really nice part about brokerages is very low beta, very low variability in the returns, pretty light capital on the distribution side, and spits out a pretty large dividend while being stable and indexed.
Well, and there's actually a fucking business as opposed to Bitcoin.
It grows and spits a dividend. But the answer is still like somebody bigger is going to want these things. They're now past the size of the management takeover, right? So that's the one that's eliminated. And now what's left is insurance company, public, private equity.
Well, in fact, did Louis say on our show, or it was another time, he said, we're not buying everybody. Like, we just won't,
For their offer, I don't know who they don't offer on, and guarantee the financials are going to be okay to do that one. They would love to buy it. They're now running some brands outside of the BrokerLink brand. So now they're buying some things and continuing to operate them as the previous name.
I guess I'm going to throw in there, like, this is a great discussion. And is there a strategic global buyer? Like, obviously you get IPO, you get equity, but is there some kind of global buyer from a different country that comes in and goes, wow, I can all of a sudden jump into Canada and be this big? Like, they've done a very good job. Like they are the biggest, are they not, in the privately held brokerage with equity money? Like, Hub is owned by, they're publicly traded, right?
Well, I haven't fully disclosed our size, but it's a reasonable guess.
I'm going to throw one at Tom. What's the next move in 2026?
Oh, let's put it this way. Having been involved in numerous acquisitions and integrations over time, the next step is the integration part, right? The fun part is the acquisition, is striking a deal and coming up with all these, plans and synergies. The really hard part is the next year, presuming that they do something and don't just leave Acera alone, which to me would be kind of silly. But presuming there's going to be some sort of integration to capture expense savings and operational efficiencies and whatnot.
Like some of the ones, like Westland, for example, was the accumulation of hundreds of small operators and hundreds of entrepreneurs. At least Acera was pretty recently the birth out of a pretty well-run Rogers and a pretty well-run Capri. And they've been grinding away, optimizing that thing. So I presume they made some progress. So now they just have 3 orgs to put together.
True. Versus
some of the...
True. Although, let's put it this way. The acquiring, if you're Acera or Navacord and you acquire a tuck-in operation, right? We did that all the time as at BrokerLink. You go to somebody and say, listen, we've got 1,000 staff and you've got 10. Here's your BrokerLink operating manual. Here's your sign for your door. Here's your new email address. Here's your new phone numbers. Here's your operating manual as to do it, how BrokerLink does it, and that's it, right? It was done, like, literally done in 6 weeks. Like, it was boom, move all the data over, move everybody onto the comp plan, change the signage, change the IT. Bob's your uncle. Now, when you're integrating something that is multi-billions with, I don't know how many staff Acera had, and say 1,000 for sake of argument, there's a lot more senior people, there's a lot more skin in the game, there's a lot more cultural things to worry about, which is always the killer. You can change a system, you can change a process. Culture is where acquisitions, integrations either succeed or die.
Back to the people thing we talked about earlier.
It's all people.
Way to come full circle there, Tom. That's good.
Didn't mean to, but
yeah, there you go. Well, it's all about people, right?
Let me ask this question here. So basically, I listed a bunch of cons, and these are in fact probably cultural things, or they can be interpreted that way. That the new notebook LM came up as potential cons based on 3 years. What Bruce Rabick was saying 3 years ago. So the critiques of this, or the cons of this, now this is from a 3-year-old Bruce Rabick interview, but there's going to be erosion of the employee ownership. That was a really big deal at Acera. There's a misalignment of time horizons between 3 years ago Acera and today Acera/Navacord. And there is some independence that is going to go away from the people at Acera, from leadership all the way down. Again, these are pretty much all cultural things. So I was looking to get your opinion. Are these truly problems? Is this an AI hallucination, or do you truly think these are things that the Navacord and the Acera teams are going to have to really pay close attention to?
I think that they will. But the question I have, as you spouted all that, was like, you compared what Bruce had to say and compared to what occurred. And does anybody actually believe their own bullshit? Ever? Right?
Great question.
And I mean, perhaps you do at the time, but at the end of the day, the dollar's going to pay, right? So you can believe it all you want, but if the check is big enough, are you happy to have everything that you said be a lie? Now, Bruce isn't there anymore, but I mean, it was sort of the MO of that organization, which did it about face. So, is anybody to be believed, ourselves included?
Here's the other angle is so we know per a very detailed analysis of AI that Bruce's vision didn't persist. It didn't go on. What we don't know, and I don't know that we'll ever know, is the chicken and egg, is which of those came first in putting this deal together.
Yeah, good question. Now, I will say, when we say very intensive AI analysis, I literally did it in the 10 minutes before we came to air. So,
I'm surprised it took that long.
I type slowly. What can I tell you? So I think that's pretty much a wrap for this episode. So as we conclude here, first off, definitely want to thank our sponsor, IFS Premium Finance, but also all the best to Sean DeSantis, Lee Rogers, Andrew Kemp, and their teams. This is another exciting chapter in the whole Canadian broker saga. So we'll be watching, see what happens, but best of luck to these guys.
Is retention important to your brokerage? Of course it is. That's why at IFS, we have a cancellation prevention process. Want more details? Give us a call. I know you don't always use a premium finance company, but when you do, you should use IFS. Cheers.